Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back going to be talking about world records and conservation and research and kids fishing. A lot of cool stuff. If you guys haven't heard of the IGFA, the International Game Fish Association, been around, I believe, since the 30s. I'll get more clarification in a second. And we have Jason, the acting IGFA president and conservation director, on here. And I had met Jason at ICAST, actually, the same day that I was getting interviewed by April Vokey. He was getting interviewed right before me. Met him, super young guy, nice guy, full of energy. And quite honestly, it was kind of the opposite of what I envisioned of the IGFA. And that's one thing that I want to kind of dispel here and talk about who they are. They're not just a bunch of old white guys sitting around talking about their Viking boats and stuff like that. And not necessarily just who they are, but what they're doing and impact they're making and really why they exist. So Jason, welcome to the show, brother.
Well, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So you are now IGFA president or acting IGFA president, depending on when people listen to this. What's the story?
Well, so our president, Neil Horton, who had been at IGFA 2 years, he wanted to do a 3-year stint here, but his family lived in Colorado, and it was a tough thing for him to be here in South Florida and his family in Colorado. So just after he finished up 2 years, he decided to step down after doing some really great things in his first 2 years here at IGFA. And the executive committee of the board of trustees came to me and asked if I would like to, fill the shoes and become IGFA president. I told them I'd agree to do so as acting president, and then they could do it to a full board vote at our January meeting that'll come up on the 25th of January.
Cool. Very cool. And was I right? Is it the 30s or 40s when it was established?
Yeah, IGFA was founded in 1939.
Okay, cool. And you've been there for a while. I listened to the April's interview, which was awesome, by the way. And you've actually, even though I know you're still a pretty young guy, you've been there for a couple decades or something?
Yeah, well, I started in 2003, so it's getting close to 2 decades. And I'm 47. I don't know if that constitutes really young, but I'm certainly not an octogenarian or anything like that. So,
dude, 40s are the new 20s. Come on now.
I feel pretty good.
Yeah, that's funny, man. So let's talk before we start talking about the records, and we're going to talk about the kid stuff you guys are doing, which I think is awesome. Like, in your humble opinion, what is the IGFA? Meaning, like, what do you guys do? Like, what's the purpose of it? Why is it still around? What do we all need to know about what you guys are doing on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis?
Well, great. A little bit of backstory. As we just mentioned, it was founded in 39, and the guy that founded it was, really a visionary. It was a fellow named Michael Lerner. And he was a guy that had means, and he had the ability to fish all around the world. And he had a couple of really cool ideas. One, he wanted to establish one angling organization that could maintain an international set of angling rules that would allow standardization in the sport, which would lead to obviously records and tournaments and things like that. But the other cool thing was that he really wanted to use the sport of fishing not only as a source of leisure, but a way to gain more data on what at the time were really unknown species of fish. He did expeditions to Chile, New Zealand, a bunch of places. And he was affiliated with the American Museum of Natural History, and he always took scientists with him, videographers, photographers, and they collected a lot of really cool early data on pelagic fishes like tuna, sharks, and billfishes. So we've always had this kind of strong tie with like fisheries science, and we got into the management part a little bit later. And then, obviously just dealing with the sport itself, we maintain what most consider to be the set of angling rules that people follow if you're, truly adhering to the sport of fishing.
Cool. And So, like, when did it shift to kind of everything? Like, I have your book; I get them every year, and it's getting pretty thick every year. It's like an encyclopedia. When did it shift from kind of these more pelagic, like the billfish, to kind of everything? I mean, pretty much every species you can imagine, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it really got going when we assumed the freshwater records from Field and Stream, and I believe that was 1978. I don't have documentation right in front of me. And then shortly thereafter, we assumed the records from the salty fly rotter. So we got freshwater records from Field and Stream, which have been, probably close to a century old, and records for fly fishing. So that really kind of increased our breadth in terms of fishing practices and made us more relevant to anglers from various different geographies and different disciplines, So it kind of went from being, the core or the kind of origin of IGFA being offshore pelagic guys that had a lot of means now to people that, could go bass fish, trout fish, or whatever.
Yeah, that's cool. And so who joins? Like, what kind of people are joining IGFA?
That's another really good question. So we didn't become a membership organization until 1972. Huh. It was President E.K. Harry at the time decided that, okay, look, this organization has grown considerably. And unlike my predecessors, given the size of the organization now, I can't fund this operation myself. So we need to find some additional means of revenue. And that's when we made it open to individual members. Before that, membership was largely relegated to club affiliations in different parts of the world. And then we've always had an international committee of representatives, at times in over 100 different countries, which were key people in their geographies that were well connected in sport fishing. But today, we've got people, young, old, from, a myriad of countries around the world that join IGFA. And for a variety of reasons. We did some really comprehensive market research 2 years ago, and we asked a lot of questions. We wanted to do a deep dive where we queried members, non-members, lapsed members to get an idea of what people thought about the IGFA's mission and vision, the projects that we have been doing, and some proposed projects that we were looking at doing. And a couple things really came out. And one is that, they believe that conservation should be a big part of our mission. And, fishing is a good vehicle to get people involved in conservation, but also we still need to remain relevant to the sport itself. I don't know if that really answers the question as the way you stated it, but
yeah, no, it does. And I just went to your site here. So it says the mission of IGFA is a nonprofit organization committed to the conservation of game fish and the promotion of responsible, ethical angling practices through science, education, rulemaking, record keeping, and recognition of outstanding accomplishments in the field of angling.
Right. And I think getting back to your question, I think I know where I was going with this now. So one of the things we asked is why do you want to be a member? Is it because we maintain records or angling rules? Is it because we do conservation? Is it because we do education? It was a little bit of all that, but one of the things that people came back that resonated the most is that a lot of our people join because they want to be part of one of the most oldest and most venerable angling institutions in the world. So the fact that we've been around for 80 years now means that we have a really rich history.
And are there, I know you guys are international, as you've stated, with members all over the world. Are there other groups like that in other countries who are trying to keep track of this stuff, or are you guys like is that like, even if you're in South Africa, is it like, hey, we're following by the IGFA rules? Like, is this like the number one kind of rule maker, if you will? I don't know the answer to that.
We like to think we are, but we have a number of what we call kind of like sister organizations. I mean, for example, the Game Fishing Association of Australia has been around for 2 years longer than the IGFA has. And in fact, when Michael Lerner, came up with this premise of one organization, he consulted heavily with some of the older angling institutions like the Avalon Tuna Club, the Game Fishing Association of Australia, the British Toonie Club. And a lot of these other organizations have rules that are, if not very identical or identical to IGFA, they're probably 90% or more in line with what our rules are.
Got it. Huh. Interesting. But like I know in America, everyone is, especially if you are trying to get a record, it's all about the IGFA rules. Like that's it, right? If
you want a record, no matter where you're fishing in the world, and you want it to be an IGFA record, you've got to follow our international angling rules. And if you look at most tournaments around the world, particularly saltwater tournaments and offshore tournaments, their rules are almost word for word IGFA rules with some minor exceptions. For example, in some locations where the fishing bite can be incredibly hot, anglers are allowed to pass rods, which is not IGFA compliant, but, everything else after that will be pretty much to the letter what our rules are.
All right, so let's talk about some of these. What are maybe the top few things that will eliminate someone from getting a record, like handing it off, or like what are some other ones that are the big no-nos, if you will, that a lot of people don't maybe realize until they read the rules?
Yeah, well, I think there's a misperception out there that IGFA angling rules are overly onerous, and I really don't think they are. We have specifications on how your tackle can be rigged. For example, we have maximum leader lengths for double line, requirements for certain lure configurations. For example, you can't use any more than 2 single hooks on a skirted lure that you're trolling for billfish. If you're using a plug, you can't have more than 3 hooks. And then there's some angling practices that dictate fair play and sportsmanship, which really is what IGFA angling rules are built around. And pretty much the cardinal rule is, after the fish strikes or takes a bait, nobody but the angler can touch rod, reel, or line. Sure. And the thought there is to ensure that it's the angler themselves that's actually fighting that fish. And while we know that there's a lot of teamwork that goes on, especially with offshore fishing, with mates wiring or landing fish, and certainly captains maneuvering the boat, it should really be the angler and the fish, in this kind of battle.
Love it. And I know something that April brought up, and I think this has been a massive shift, not just with you guys, but with fishermen in general, from, tournaments who are now doing the, CPR, the catch photo release. I know it used to be that, and you see a lot of the old school pictures and stuff our grandfathers have in all their old photo albums of all kinds of different fish, being hung up. Nowadays, I presume you don't have to always kill the fish to get an IGFA record.
Yeah, in fact, our rules have really never dictated that you have to kill a fish. That's a big misperception. Uh-huh. We do stipulate that you can't weigh a fish on a boat. And that's because presumably the rocking motion of the boat will make it hard to obtain an accurate reading from a scale. We do allow junior angler records to weigh fish from a boat. But in addition to that, we have instituted since 2011 another record category that's predicated on length and not weight. And in that particular record category, it's mandatory that anglers release their fish in good condition. And, especially since we've instituted that category in 2011, we've had years at well over 50% of the records that are submitted to the IGFA are released. And keep in mind that, a lot of the records that come in are for things that people would normally love to eat, like, a mutton snapper or a triple tail or something like that. So you have people that really are involved in this conservation ethic, and even though they're looking to get their name in the record books, they're still releasing fish whenever they can. And I think that's a really great thing in the sport in general.
And, what I've found, and I know this probably doesn't describe every angler who's going out there who's like conscious of getting records, and the ones that are right, the ones that have everything by the books. They've read all the rules, they have all the right leader line, and everything is ready in case they do come across that trophy fish. They're usually the ones that are all about throwing everything back anyways. Like they want to get that fish back in as quickly as possible after taking measurements. Is what I found. It's rarely is it that person who's out there who's got 100+ world records who's trying to harvest every single fish that they catch.
I think you're absolutely right. If you look at a lot of our top record people right now, they're releasing a large majority of their fish, and there are going to be some species that you can't do that with. It's not possible to catch a billfish put it in a live well, take it to shore, weigh it, and release it. They just don't operate that way from a physiological perspective. But a lot of people also have the misperception that most of the records that come in for IGFA are these big pelagic fishes like tunas, billfishes, and sharks, and that records are killing a bunch of those every year, and that's just not the case.
So what do the real stats show?
The real stats, I haven't run them in a while, but some years the median weight for saltwater might be 30 pounds or something like that. So they're definitely smaller species of fish that are amenable to catch and release. And some of these other bigger records that have been established in the IGFA record books have been around for a long time, and records have a behavior or tendency over time. They plateau. They become, unbreakable, to an extent in certain line classes and things like that. And so that kind of prohibits, people from just going out and killing a bunch of fish for records. Once you've established that kind of benchmark, that's hard to beat.
Well, and also too, just being frank, it's the greatest or the largest shark or the largest marlin, these billfish, they make the news, right? And they're kind of polarizing because you the second that happens, and and that's shareable. Like, people love seeing the biggest. It's a grand slam, right? It's the grand slam in the World Series. Like, no one's going to share, or even like PETA doesn't even care about the world record sheepshead being harvested, right? No offense to you sheepshead anglers, but what I'm saying here. It's like, oh, cool, it's a big sheepshead versus like you see 1,000-pound marlin or 1,000-pound shark that's hung up like that. It's eye catching. It's like, holy smokes, that's a massive fish. It's 1,000 pounds. That kind of stuff makes the news and creates news. So that makes sense. It makes sense that that's what we hear more of. And in reality, I mean, that might happen once a year, and there's records being sent in. From what I can see in my book, every hour of the day. I mean, how many records are submitted every year? Do you know?
The last few years we've been between 400 and 700. I think since I've been at IGFA, the most that I've seen come through in a given year is maybe 1,200 in a year. Wow! So it just kind of varies a little bit.
So it really is. It is. I was being sarcastic, but it really is multiple a day, then, huh?
Yeah, it can be. And getting back to your point, I mean, we're living in the social age right now where everything is instantaneous, and something comes up and it's picked up by an individual or an organization that really doesn't have a clear understanding of what IGFA does, and it has the propensity to get spinned in a way that's really not correct. So one of the things that I always get questions on, and I'm a biologist by training and somebody that's deeply concerned about conservation. My previous title here was conservation director, and I've had people ask me numerous times, how can you reconcile, being a conservation organization and you being a biologist and a conservationist with the fact that your organization accepts records for dead fish? And my comeback to that is always easy. If you look at the stats on the number of fish that come in each year, I don't care what species you're looking at for the most part, the number that come in are very few compared to global commercial exploitation. And so my short answer to that is, if I thought that IGFA records are in any way contributing to a significant decline of a species, we'd be doing something different. Yep. But I just don't feel that's the way things are. If you look at global landings for these different species versus what comes in total for 400 to 700 IGFA records in a year.
Well, let's just do the math. So if you say on a good year, you guys get 1,000 submissions, and you've already said that half of them, are released, if not more. I mean, we're talking about worst case 500 fish in a year are being killed. I mean, that's not even one net of one big ship out there that might catch bycatch. You know what I'm saying? Like, that happens every single day. And who knows how many fleets of boats of fish, being killed, sometimes not even harvested, just bycatch, and they're dead, caught in the net. So yeah, I mean, it's such a small thing in the scheme of things. I think the big question is it promoting going out and just finding big fish and killing them, or is it helping in encouraging more young people and just causing more excitement to kind of win that badge of honor to be listed in the IGFA? And I would hope that would be the case. I think you and I both know when someone makes that, they're sharing it with all their friends, right? Because I've seen the post, someone finally gets their certificate in the mail from you guys that it's approved and verified. I mean, I would like to think it's encouraging more people to go out there and fish and have more fun fishing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that, recognizing outstanding achievements in angling, which is, at the core of IGFA through records and our different programs, is not counter to conservation. We promote actively catch and release, best release practices. We're strong proponents on the use of circle hooks. We participated in some early circle hook research studies to determine the efficacy of those tools, not only in terms of being a better means to catch fish, but being much better for fish in terms of improving their post-release survival. And then, again, these other people that see these records and immediately jump to conclusions that IGFA is decimating the world's oceans, they don't have any idea about the conservation work that we do as well.
So let's pivot over to that. What are you guys doing? I would definitely want to talk about the kids' passport stuff too, but on the conservation side, what are the big initiatives now?
Well, I mean, you talked about billfish. That's something that, if a big billfish is caught, whether it's an IGFA record or not, and it's harvested, and I want to backpedal for a minute and say that any record application that comes into IGFA has to be harvested legally. If anything that's in variance to national or international fisheries laws automatically negates consideration for an IGFA record.
Okay.
So I don't think a lot of people know that. But I mean, getting back to billfish, I would argue that the IGFA has probably done more in the last decade to conserve and study billfish than anybody else. With our partners at Wild Oceans, we were the driving force behind the Billfish Conservation Act of 2012 and a subsequent technical amendment that came out a year ago that now bans the importation of marlin, sailfish, and spearfish into the continental United States. Prior to that law, the United States was the world's biggest importer of marlin, sailfish, and spearfish. So
really,
we've done a lot there. Since 2011, we've been doing an international satellite tagging project called the IGFA Great Marlin Race, where tournament anglers actually fund the price of satellite tags, which are not cheap. They're $5,000 a piece, and they deploy them in billfish around the world. And to date, we've deployed over 400 of these in 21 different locations around the world. And we are now holding the biggest database on satellite tagging for billfish in the world. And we do this through our partners at Stanford University. We work with Dr. Barbara Block. And on top of that, we make all these data freely available to other scientists. They're not proprietary to IGFA or Stanford. We encourage other scientists to utilize these data to turn it into productive science that will hopefully drive better management and conservation for these fish.
That's cool. So let's go back to the import. That's crazy, man. So you guys are obviously getting political too. If you're, I mean, that's you're getting laws changed. It's not like that's crazy. So what? So how did that even play out? Like, how do you stop that from swordfish and billfish from being imported like that?
Well, just to clarify, swordfish were not part of this because swordfish and most of the range are actually being managed quite well and are a sustainable option for people to eat. Okay. But I was having dinner or lunch, with who's now a board member right now in 2007, and he was saying, I would just wish I knew who was, harvesting the most billfish, exporting it or importing it. He said, do you know? I said, no, I don't. I don't think there's ever been a comprehensive analysis that's looked at the global billfish market. But I told him that I did have a colleague that could do it. At the time, a good friend of mine was an economist with the National Marine Fisheries Service, and he had just struck out on his own to do independent consulting. And we funded him to do the first ever global analysis of billfish markets. And that's how we found out that the U.S. was the biggest importer of said product. When we're the country that probably is the most active in bill fishing. Obviously, Australia and some other countries are very big as well. But bill fishing is big business in the United States. It's a substantial economic driver. The vast majority of billfish that are caught by recreational anglers are released voluntarily.
Yep.
And here we are, we're the country that's importing the most of these species. So that was the first step, finding out that we were the problem. Then we went into kind of a public awareness campaign where we tried to educate people, because, this stuff was showing up in the heartland of the U.S. and other places where people didn't know what a marlin or a sailfish was. These people, if they saw tiger or bear on a menu or in a grocery store, they would say, oh, no, we don't want to eat that. There's not that many of those compared to other species, and, they're apex predators. So we had to teach them that in many ways, these billfish are kind of the aquatic analogs to these terrestrial predators, and it's not a good idea to eat these things. But after a while, it was just clear to us that if we were really going to move the needle in any kind of substantial way, we had to go the legislative route. And it took us a long time to do it, but we got it done.
That's awesome. So when did that happen? That was...
The initial law was passed in 2012, and we had a technical amendment passed, I believe, in 2018.
Okay, wow. So all kind of recent then. Wow.
Yep. And so, we do that, and then we've been doing work lately, too, on the other end of the food chain. So, one of the things that people look at is like IGFA just works on, these large, highly migratory species. And indeed, that's our history. And we did that for a number of reasons. One, again, it kind of speaks to the core of our membership, and you never want to abandon the core of your membership. But these species are international, and we're an international organization, so it's an appropriate suite of species for us to work on, because, people that, like fish for marlin occur in Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, you name it. These fish, tunas and billfishes are found around the world in tropical and subtropical waters. But, in the last, 5 or 6 years, we've been transitioning, kind of looking at the opposite end of the food chain from a policy or management perspective, where we're more concerned now, not more concerned, but equally as concerned about looking at forage fish, the little fish that, serve a very important role in marine ecosystems as food for the things we like to fish for. And this is an emerging fisheries management concept. Traditionally, a lot of these forage species, number one, aren't managed, but the ones that are basically just managed from the perspective of, okay, how much can we take out of the water each year for this species, still leave enough in so they can reproduce and replace the number that we took out, the classic maximum sustainable yield paradigm. But really that doesn't reflect or take into consideration how much of these fish need to be left in the water to account for their natural role as forage for anything from snook to sailfish. So we've been working on that. We're behind a federal bill that would protect unmanaged forage fish species. We've been doing a lot of work in Florida on the data side. We've been working with the folks at the Florida Fish and Wildlife Research Institute, great people there. And we're sponsoring fellowships or internships for graduate students to a year to work hand in hand with these established scientists on a wealth of data that they've been collecting through their fisheries independent monitoring program for the last 20 years in 7 different estuaries. So we're helping them answer research questions that they have, but haven't had the time or the capacity to answer. And, we've been doing that since 2016. We've funded 6 fellowships so far. We've got a couple great peer-reviewed publications out of it, and it's really just turned into a great model for how a public-private partnership can really turn out some great science for relatively little funding.
That's cool. So let's talk. I want to talk about this forage fish, Conservation Act. Is that right? Forage fish. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I assume the problem is not I don't think we're helping it in terms of recreational anglers, but this is the commercial stuff. Is this the ones who are using it for what was that one book about sport fishing where he talked about they were using it for all the the oils and the stuff that you see in GNC. Is that it? Is it for the vitamins?
A lot of these are what you would call reduction fisheries. So they're taking species, whether it be menhaden or whatever, and they're reducing that fish either into fish meal, fish oil that can go into anything from nutritional supplements, aquaculture or pet feed, cosmetics sometimes, and things like that.
So is that the issue, or is it one specific?
Well, the real issue is that as I mentioned before, a lot of these species aren't managed. And one of the core things behind the Forage Fish Protection Act is that if this is passed, you cannot develop any new fisheries for these species that aren't managed until there's data in place that demonstrate not only how many can be sustainably removed each year, but also it has to take into account how much needs to be left in the ocean to fulfill, again, the natural role of these species as forage for a variety of marine predators, not just fish, birds, marine mammals, what have you.
Interesting. So, what role do you guys play in that?
Well, we've been working with some other partners on this, both environmental and other recreational conservation organizations, just to get behind it and voice support that this is very important, to people in Congress, that this is really a bill that could help, our fisheries in the United States.
Cool. Yeah, I know that's certainly going to be one that's a hot topic probably next year. I see that coming. That's going to be cool. All right. Well, I saw something too about, was it drift nets or something going on in California that you guys were doing?
Yeah. So we've been doing a lot of work out on the West Coast, and this is a big collaboration with IGFA. Wild Oceans, which again was a partner of ours for the Billfish Conservation Act, and some other really heavy hitters like the American Sport Fish Association, CCA California. And we've been trying to help transition that fishery, the swordfish fishery out there. It's managed by the Pacific Fishery Management Council. And it's really the last place in the United States where drift gill nets are allowed to be used. So imagine a drift gill net, a net that floats in the open ocean that could be about as long as the Golden Gate Bridge, several, 100 meters or so deep, just floating around. Of course, it's going to catch swordfish, but it catches a lot of other things too. The bycatch is just abhorrent in this fishery, and it's a small fleet of boats, well under 40 vessels, that kills more marine mammals in the form of dolphins, whales, seals, and such than all other commercial fisheries on the West Coast.
Wow.
So it's not trying to say, okay, commercial fishing is bad. Here you've got a species, swordfish, that's being managed well from the perspective is that the stock is healthy, but the gear that's being used is not sustainable because it's got such a high bycatch. So we've been working really hard to, number one, eliminate drift gill nets. We were successful by working with our partners in the California legislature and getting a California bill passed in 2018, which will completely phase out drift gill nets by 2023. But also at the same time, trying to promote innovative approaches that allow commercial anglers to go out and harvest swordfish. We don't want to put people out of business. We just want to find good alternatives that allow them to get a good product and do it in a sustainable fashion. And we were working with the Pacific Fishery Management Council for a number of years through some testing they were doing on gear called deep set buoy gear. And as it sounds, these are basically individual buoys that are sometimes linked that have, 1 to 3 hooks on them that are deployed during the daytime deep below the thermocline. So you're targeting an area where you're going to catch primarily swordfish. And the research that was done on this gear found that close to 90% of the fish that were caught on deep set buoy gear were actually swordfish. So swordfish comprised the vast majority of the catch. But the other great thing is because this gear is actively tended, the fish are landed quickly in ice, so the quality of the product is better. So we found out that the market price for a swordfish caught on deep set buoy gear is about double that of one that's caught with a drift gill net, and you're incurring much less bycatch.
Interesting.
And so, we were pushing the Pacific Fisheries Management Council for years to develop a fishery and authorize this new gear, and we're proud to say recently they did authorize deep set buoy gear as a new fishery for swordfish. So, trying to get rid of one gear, but yet provide a better alternative at the same time to allow commercial anglers to harvest swordfish. Unfortunately, right after we did that, the council also wanted to push the idea of establishing a longline fishery out of West Coast ports, but it seems like we've halted that for the moment as well at the November meeting there was a tremendous outpouring from the recreational community and individuals from our coalition. We had 3 IGFA board members from California provide public testimony, and they decided to stop scoping the idea of establishing a new longline fishery out of the west coast of the United States.
That's cool, man. That's good stuff. Let's switch over to the kids. I remember, I think it was actually Adrian who had reached out to me and kind of give an idea of what you guys were starting to do. It sounds like that's now in full effect with this passport program. What's going on there?
Absolutely. So we have a goal of teaching 100,000 kids to fish, and we have an excellent education department here at IGFA. A couple of folks here that have been running local educational programs for years. You know, one of our signature events has been our summer camp, where we use fishing kind of as a carrot to get kids outside and to learn more about fresh and saltwater aquatic ecosystems and to make the next generation of not only anglers but environmental stewards. But, you know, we decided we've got to be able to export this knowledge some way to be truly international. And what we developed is something called a Passports to Fishing program, which is essentially a fishing clinic in a box. So you have a big Plano box. It's got all the materials to run a fishing clinic, including mats with different stations that teach everything from knot tying to lure selection to environmental stewardship, you name it, casting safety. Each one of these kits come with 20 rods and reels, and we've shipped these out to clubs, representatives in different areas around the world. And it allows them to hold fishing clinics in their area. And last year alone, we distributed 50 of these passports to 21 different countries in 6 continents. And the idea is to use these things repeatedly, you know, so, you know, it's not just a one-off event, you know, you're teaching kids, but then maybe a couple months later or next year you run another event. But again, the end goal is to teach IGFA ethics and develop that next generation of anglers and environmental stewards.
That's awesome. So how do the kids get them? Like, do they have to apply, or how does it all work?
Well, we're working in kind of a regional perspective. You know, we have affiliated clubs, we have representatives, and we also have something that we just instituted called our regional representative council. So we have councils that are based on geographies around the world. So we have them established in Europe and the Mediterranean, Central America and the Caribbean, in South America right now. Our goal this year coming up is to get them done in Oceania, in Asia, and perhaps one other location, but that's another venue. So you send these kits out to key individuals or organizations, and then they spread the word in their area to attract kids to come in and learn more about the IGFA and how to be ethical anglers. That's
awesome, man. So
it's really been a great concept. And again, kudos to our education staff for putting this together, because it's really, really taken off. You know, we've got a relationship now with the Boy Scouts of America. They're utilizing our fishing curriculum as well. So we're really being able to permeate the kind of international space for youth education.
So, and do you guys put on any clinics too? Like, do you guys have like a kind of a schedule, or is it more you're just kind of helping facilitating and kind of building the platform?
No, we still do. We have kind of family fun fishing clinics spread around the year. In fact, we're going to have one right after New Year's. I believe it's the 4th, to check just to make sure. But we also are holding our summer camp again this year as well. So people in the Tri-County area, Broward, Dade, Monroe, you know, it's a real fun thing for kids to do in the summertime. And each week is different, so they don't go through the same kind of curriculum. Each week they learn something new, and it's a combination of learning things in our classroom, whether it's fish dissection or things like that, but we also get them out to fish in environments ranging from offshore on drift boats to freshwater bass fishing and pretty much everything in between. So it's a great way for kids to spend their summer. And, getting back to that passports to fishing too, I was kind of remiss in saying that, these things really wouldn't work unless they were translated, but we've got them translated into a handful of different languages right now. So I think we have English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Italian. and I think we're shooting for an additional 3 other languages. So again, this really allows us to propel the stuff that we've honed over a decade or so of doing local education out to other countries around the world.
That's really cool. And on that summer camp, I'm interested for my own kids. What are the ages that you guys accept?
I think the ages are up to, I don't know, Joe, off the top of my head. I think it's up to 15. I can get back to you on that.
Okay. And you're not sitting like 6-year-olds. Is it like 10 to is it?
Yeah, I think 6 is a bit young. I think you're looking kind of more from that 10 to 15 age bracket.
Okay. Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. I'll get with you offline and we'll get more details on that and put them in the show notes. Cause that's, I know there's probably a lot of parents that I would love to send my kids that. That sounds so cool.
And all this information is readily available. We completely overhauled our website last year. So we have a pretty brand new website that's comprehensive. So all this information that I'm talking about can be found on our website, www.igfa.org.
IGFA.org. Cool. Let's pivot into you. I want to hear a little bit more about the background. Like, had there always been a conservation director at IGFA, or was that, were you one of the first one, or what?
That's an interesting story. So previous to working here, I worked for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission in their Division of Marine Fisheries. And I worked in their Office of Outreach and Education, and I was hired because I have an academic background and I also love to fish. So that allowed me to kind of liaise with the scientists that were doing kind of the research and the stock assessment stuff, understand what's going on with the status of different stocks in Florida, then take that information out and kind of disseminate it to recreational anglers in a way that they could readily understand, because I'm an angler myself. And the guy that hired me for that, my boss at the time was a fellow named Rob Kramer. Well, in 2002, when IGFA was looking for a new president, he landed that job. And about 9 months later, he gave me a call and says, I could use some help over here. And to answer your question, there was never a conservation director level position here before. So I was the first one really in that capacity here.
Too cool.
No, it's been a fan. Sometimes you can't believe that you get the opportunity to merge two things that you're really passionate about, science and fishing. So it's really been a fantastic opportunity for me.
Oh, heck yeah. Sounds like a dream job for you. That's awesome, man. So two last questions. Do you have any world records yourself?
I do not. I'm not really a tournament angler myself. I've got friends and colleagues that are big into it. I put enough pressure on myself when I go fishing, and I get to go fishing maybe, if I'm lucky, once a week. More often lately it's once or twice a month. So if I get out and I'm fishing, I'm an inshore guy. Tarpon, snook, redfish, that kind of stuff, bonefish, permit. So if I'm out on my skiff with, a friend and we're fishing for the day, I've got enough pressure on me to, just figure out where the fish are, not, and do that without being on the water, 4 or 5 days a week, like some of my friends that are guides. I do have an interesting story, though. When we introduced gray snapper, mangrove snapper, as a line class and fly rod species, years ago, I was fishing with a friend of mine in the Everglades, and we're fishing for snook. And I'm throwing a fly, and I get a solid hit, and up comes a pretty chunky 1.5 pound, 2 pound mangrove snapper. And I held this up, and my friend's name was Gary, and I said, "Gary, do you know what this is?" He says, "Let me guess, the new 12-pound tippet record for a gray snapper." I said, "No, this is breakfast tomorrow." So no, I don't have any records myself.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, because I looking through the book, I mean, if you wanted to, you could almost kind of almost like arbitrage, right? Because there's some where there's some gaps, and not to say it's easy to get a world record, but there's just some random species that have some pretty obvious gaps that could be filled. Maybe it is a new species that got introduced late, or just something that not many people catch or target as more of a bycatch. But I always thought that was interesting. If any of you guys at the local office did that.
So Adrian Gray, who does our graphics and production work here, you know Adrian well. Yep. He's a fantastic guy, probably one of the best all-around fishermen I've ever met. And on top of that is a brilliant artist and photographer. I don't know how he can do all this stuff. But his girlfriend, Regina, recently got the woman's 6-pound record for snook, which is a real high-level record.
Yeah, that's too cool. What was it was the 6-pound, this is on fly?
Women's line class. I think it was 20-something pounds. I can look real quick.
Dang, yeah.
It was a big fish. But we have a number of other board members that have had a number of records. In fact, one of our board members has more records than anybody else. But in terms of staff, I don't think you have folks here really targeting records that much. But, most of our people that work here are pretty diehard anglers, or at least like to fish whenever they can.
Yep, the old misconception. Oh, you work for a fishing company, you must fish every day. Not exactly.
Oh man, if I had $1 for every time somebody says, "Oh man, Jason's got a dream job. He gets to go fishing for a living," I'm like, I live behind a desk.
Yeah, you and me both. My brother now, the other, he somehow got the role. I got the role of CEO, and he got Chief Fishing Addict is his title, and so he is on the water almost every day now. So. He's got it good.
Yeah, I think I heard that story.
Yeah, son of a gun. So who does? Who is the person that has the most total records? Is it
a guy by the name of Marty Arostegui? He's got over 400.
Yeah, I've heard that name. Yep.
Yep.
Dang.
And he's got a lot, but we've got another one of our board members, Gary Carter, who is really a light tackle aficionado on billfish. He's one of probably a handful of people in that rarefied universe that are really good at light line fishing for really big offshore fish.
Amazing. All right, so final question. Assuming you are the ongoing IGFA president, what excites you? Like any big initiatives or anything like that? Hey, if I could leave one or two legacies, why I do this, what would it be?
Well, there's a couple of things that I'm excited about. One of the things that we're doing is we're getting back involved with tournaments or competitive angling. We used to run an inshore and an offshore world championship series that was, wildly successful, but for various reasons in 2006, it was determined that, we probably shouldn't be in the tournament running business. Well, we're revisiting that and looking at different ways for us to be engaged with that again, because again, that really speaks to, kind of a core segment of IGFA's membership, people that fish in salt water and people that fish competitively. And another great guy here at work, Jack Vitek, who's our marketing director and chief of staff, he's put together a concept for a light tackle invitational. That's going to take place February 6th through 8th at Sailfish Marina. And it's a 12-pound tournament for sailfish, all catch and release, obviously. So I'm excited about that. I'd like to see IGFA try to become more relevant in the sport itself by being engaged with competitive angling and more with the sport. Obviously, conservation is something that's always going to be near and dear to me, and I think it's important to the organization. So making sure that we're doing good work on species or fisheries from the standpoint of promoting good policy or doing research. I'm really jazzed up about a project that I'm going to launch in January with a colleague of mine, Dr. Andy Danielchuk at University of Massachusetts at Amherst. He's done a lot of good work with Bonefish Tarpon Trust, with Permit and Bonefish, and he's done some outstanding work with John Trevally. We're going to be launching a project in South America on Golden Dorado, which is a really iconic freshwater species in 5 different countries down there. You've probably seen it. It's all over social these days, and it's really an exploding fishery, but we don't know much about it in terms of some of the basic life history parameters for the species, population units, and things like that. So I'm excited to get that project started. I just think the sky's the limit with IGFA. We've got a great group of supporters. We've got great staff, and just being able to do things that speak to the sport of fishing itself, continuing to educate young anglers, get new people into the sport, and again, in a way that teaches them to be environmental stewards, is just great stuff. I think we've got a lot of great raw material to work with, and a lot of potential to do things on a variety of different levels around the world.
Yeah, you certainly have the raw materials and the history and the foundation. So it's, man, cool to see you in this role, having met you personally and having met.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys. I mean, we talked about this offline. Just I ran into the whole IGFA crew there at ICAST. And I'm now 40, and I felt like everyone was my age or younger. It was not the opposite, right? I felt like everyone was in that 32 to 45 range, and that was cool to see. You guys got some energy and youth. I'm calling anyone in their 40s still youthful, and I think that's awesome to see. So, man, keep up the good work, and if we can help out anyway, especially in that passport thing, I'm still really excited about what you guys are doing there, and want to find some way to team up and maybe do some events here in Florida. And where are you guys? You guys are in South Florida somewhere, right?
We're here in Fort Lauderdale. We're actually in Dania Beach, but we're 5 minutes away from the Fort Lauderdale airport. And I'd love to work with you on that. And for anybody that's listening to this, if you visit our website, you can get some more information on these various different programs, and feel free to pick up the phone and give us a call. We're always happy to talk to members or people that just want to know more about what the IGFA stands for. Yep.
And if you do join, you get that fantastic encyclopedia-sized book. It's actually really cool to look through. It's one of those that I'll just kind of glance through it occasionally, or I'll see someone post a really big fish on social media and claim it was a certain length or size, and I'll actually go, pick up the IGFA record book and check it out. So, you guys join, support them. It's IGFA.org, and you even get a little cool sticker for the back of your car or truck. So, dude, thank you. This has been fun. You certainly, kind of clarified a little bit of what you guys are doing and what you stand for, and really kind of where you're moving towards. So that was this is good.
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity, and happy holidays to you.
Right back at you, my friend. And where can people reach you personally? Is it best email or just?
They can reach me by email, or you can call us directly here at the office, 954-927-2628.
Cool. And email, can you share that online or?
Sure. It's J. Schratweiser, which nobody will be able to spell because my last name is 12 letters, at IGFA.org. Actually, the best way for people to get in touch is we've got an HQ email address. It's HQ@IGFA.org.
Cool. And we'll put the whole show notes if you're listening in your car or working out, like I know a lot of people do that I've heard listen to the podcast. We will put everything at saltstrong.com/podcast. We'll have this one up at the top, and we'll put links to everything, including Jason's really impossible email. Schratweiser. I don't know. Sure. SCHRAT, and then Weiser, WIESER.
You nailed it on the first try. That's a rarity.
Well, I'd also seen it multiple times because I was trying to pronounce it like, all right, man, make sure I don't screw his last name up. And I don't even think I said it to me. I think I just said Jason, just not to look like an idiot and mess it up. So,
yeah, so it's J. Schratweiser at IGFA.org.
Cool, man. This has been fun. Jason, thank you so much. Hope to see you again soon, and maybe we'll have to all go out fishing in one of these days that we get out of the office.
We need to do that.
All right, buddy.
All right, take care.
All right, thank you, man.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. their souls to stay.